John, have I told you I'm addicted to Carwell's auctions?
You might have mentioned it, yeah.
Well, they're online 6 days a week. They're getting 20,000 fresh vehicles in every month. It's actually one of my best sources of quality stock. Listings have got plenty of photos, service history, and background checks for peace of mind. And you can pay sellers in a click with Carwell Wallet. They even transport your car with built-in protection of up to £25,000.
Well, that's more than you will ever need.
Exactly, John. So, dealers, if you're not on CarWow, you really should get in on the auction. See what I've done, John?
Oh, God.
Anyway, to find out more, sign up for free at carwow.co.uk/partners/auctions.
Welcome back to the Car Dealer Podcast, where we pick our favourite stories of the week and ask an industry guest to choose which were the best. I'm John Ray, and joining me this week from his dealership, in fact, is James Baggett. James, why are you sat in front of a very leggy diesel Toyota Auris?
Not leggy, John. It's average mileage for the year. I think you'll find 100,000 miles. And this is a little bit weird. I'm at work and you're in my house. This is it's like, how did this happen?
I'm not actually going to let you back in again.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, I've had to rush down to the dealership this morning because I had notification from DHL that this parcel, which is in my hand, for those people watching on YouTube, was arriving from Japan. That is the ECU for the broken Suzuki Jimny that we imported, that has arrived on special delivery, ready to be bussed up to Robin Luscombe of Luscombe's Leeds next week with the Suzuki Jimny in the hope that we will fix it. When I spoke to Robin Luscombe this week, he gave me in his typical Yorkshire fashion the words, "If this works, I will bear my bare ass to Leeds city centre," was what he said. So I don't actually have much hope that this is going to fix the problem. That's not what you want to hear, is it? From the dealer that's going to be that is your salvation for the problem. But yeah, for those people who don't know what I'm talking about, basically we imported a Suzuki Jimny. A man broke the clocks as he tried to
in the UK, you should say.
UK, yeah, broke the clocks as he tried to get the odometer into miles from kilometres. It now doesn't have a working speedo. We've tried 3 sets of clocks, and everybody I speak to says the ECU is fried. So I spent £1,000 on this one on special delivery from Japan, and God knows how much with Robin Luscombe next week to fix the problem. But this is a car I sold 8 weeks ago, and I've got a screaming customer who's desperate to have their new car. So we're trying to do everything we possibly can to get it sorted. But John, I have news for you.
Do you?
Yes, guess what I did this week?
Bought some cars.
I did buy some cars, yes. I actually bought 8
Is that
more.
it, really? Was that your news?
No, but the news is what the cars are. I bought 8 more imports.
Oh, yes, you did. Yeah, but you bought them from a strange and faraway land, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Not Japan, John. Norwich. I went to see it.
Equally, you did need to fly there, obviously, because it's
probably would have been faster. Yeah, a lot faster than driving there. But yes, I spoke to a dealer who specialises in imports. He had 300 of them on his forecourt. While I was there, 5 containers turned up from Japan, and he was busy unloading them all. And he basically said, "What do you want?" He said, "Go and have a look around the forecourt, pick which ones you want, and then we'll see if we can have a deal." So Joe and I had a little walk around, picked some Volkswagen Ups, Volvo, a couple more Suzuki Jimnys. Had a sit down in his office. He told us a number, which, funnily enough, was exactly the same as the number that we wanted to pay. So we shook his hand, paid him the money, and they turn up on Wednesday. But the good news, John, with all of these is they're all done. All of the paperwork is done. No more headaches with the DVLA. They're ready to retail, and they're all going to have better margin in than anything that I've bought in the UK before. So
you've presented that as a very exciting and new development, but what you've basically just told everyone is that you were rubbish at dealing with imports yourself, and you've just paid someone else to take all the profit out of them for you, and then you can sell them to people. So,
John, that's a shame. That's a shame. But yeah, you're right. That's exactly what's happened. And also, my negotiation skills when we sat down around the table, a hard nosed motor trade discussion, and he put his number forward. What I should have done is gone back with a number far lower, and then we should have met somewhere in the middle. But instead, I just went, "Yes, thanks very much," and shook his hand. And the look of surprise on his face when I agreed to the first number that came out of his head was, shows that I'm not very good at business. Yes.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, shall I introduce our guest,
Yeah,
who
please.
has far more experience and is much better at business than you, James? Sorry to say that. Well, joining us this week is Nigel McMinn, former COO of Lookers, of course, and now Managing Director of Pybus Recruitment. Nigel, thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Did any of that sound familiar, Nigel?
No, thankfully, none of that sounded familiar to me, James, but I'm in awe of you. Talk about sleeves rolled up, leading from the front.
Well,
That's impressive.
Trying to give it a go. It's it's been a lot of fun and games. But anyway, enough of that. Nigel, there's no such thing as a free lunch here at the Car Dealer podcast. So I'm going to ask you some questions
It's
before.
not even lunch, actually.
Sorry, no lunch. But yeah, let's start. I mean, you've been in this industry for quite some time, haven't you? It's just for those people that are hearing about this for the first time. Let's have a little bit of a rundown on your career.
Oh, blimey, that's 30 years, James.
Okay. Well, let's do the shortened version.
Yes. Well, technically 29 years. I started on the 96 on a T-plate, selling Nissan Micras at Reg Vardy Nissan in Sunderland. So, yes, I worked for Reg Vardy for 11 years. Joined as a financial analyst, actually. I'm an accountant by training. I've tried to hide that all my career. Because it's so irrelevant when you're on the sort of sales side of the business. But yeah, the first commercial role was general manager of Sunderland Nissan. 11 really happy years at Reg Vardy. Saw Sir Peter actually earlier this week. Still looking really well, and there were great days at Reg Vardy, and it was a brilliant company, and he was a brilliant leader. And so, I always say, without causing any offence to anyone, that I joined Reg Vardy and I never left Reg Vardy. I left Pendragon. They bought the business in 2006, and it was just culturally very different. It was an enormous organisation. They were grappling to sort of integrate that and Bramwell before it. And so I decided to move on and went to a family business based in Newcastle, owned by the Squires family. They're still great friends of mine, and became managing director for them. 7 very happy years there. And then one of my oldest friends, Andy Bruce, tapped me on the shoulder at a Volkswagen meeting and said, time to come and join the big boys. And I said, no, thanks. I'm happy where I am. But he persuaded me to go and join Lookers. And I had a very good time, enjoyed Lookers. I thought we made a big difference to it. And then obviously we had a couple of profit warnings and an FCA investigation, which was pretty distracting. And so, that my time and Andy's time came to an end there. And then I spent 4 years up in Glasgow trying to do a management buyout with Andy of a fleet business, a fleet and leasing business up there, which for various reasons didn't happen. And so I've now done what many people do, which is fall into recruitment. I don't think anyone leaves school and says, I'm going to be a recruiter. But it suits somebody who has worked in either, one role or one industry all their life, because, with a bit of grey hair and having worked at a lot of different places with a lot of great people, you end up with quite a nice black book of talent. And of course, in recruitment, it's not rocket science. It's just finding good people, good companies that, there's a sort of cultural fit. And so I'm only 6 weeks in, but I have to say that it's thoroughly enjoyable because, I've gone from a sort of quiet life of walking the dog and maybe one phone call a day to like 25 phone calls a day, most of which are sort of reconnecting with people that I've known from the past So it's a very good sort of social job, if that's the sort of thing you like. So hopefully that's a very quick rundown of 30 years.
I mean, I can see why this new business is a great fit for you, and I'll come on to that. But I just, want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned there. I mean, the Lookers thing must have been incredibly stressful when that came out. It was just before COVID as well, wasn't it? It was the end of
Yes.
2019, and it was all sort of kicking off during COVID. I mean, personally, that must have been very, very hard.
It was, James, yeah. Because until that point, I'd had a kind of easy, unblemished career. I'd never really been for an interview. I'd never asked for a promotion. And things had just kind of happened, and results had always generally come. I mean, we all have our tough periods. But long before the FCA investigation, you'll remember that around that time, the new car market was going backwards at about 3 or 4%. And so from a peak, it was just losing pace, and it was becoming very difficult to sort of make up the shortfall in profits from used car and after sales. So the trading environment was challenging. Costs were escalating already, back then, before we hit the big period of inflation. So I think I was under more pressure, and I was probably suffering from stress. I think we're all encouraged to talk about it more openly now.
Mm.
Long before any of the kind of really tasty stuff happened. But the FCA investigation was very stressful, and it was very distracting. We were asked to put in place the same standards as a bank. And the reality is that I don't think any motor group in the country, no matter how compliant and how well regulated and how well resourced in that area, I don't think any motor group in the country would have passed the test of being at a banking standard. And, it was made abundantly clear to us, we expect you to operate like a financial services company that happens to sell cars. And the reality is, I think that the whole industry, maybe even still to some extent today, considers themselves as car retailers first, that also use financial products to facilitate the sale of a car. But that's not the way the regulator sees it. And so we had to put a lot of resource in. It was very distracting and very stressful. And of course, we were trying to keep the ship sailing forward in a tough trading environment. And, I accept that if you have 2 profit warnings in a year in a public company, then somebody's going to have to pay the price, James. But it led to a year of extreme stress following the departure. Because obviously there was a kind of chain of events that unfolded, and whilst it all resolved itself, you're absolutely right. In the middle of that, it was a very, very difficult period.
Because
But
you kept on getting dragged into it, didn't you? I mean, I remember when we were writing all of these stories back in the time, back in that period, there was, I mean, Lookers was on the news agenda near enough every day for a long, long period of time. And you and Andy couldn't say anything, could you? I mean, you were having to watch on all of these headlines and on our publication and many more without being able to have your say.
yeah, and of course we were in a legal process, so you couldn't. Even if you'd asked me to say anything, I couldn't have said anything. And we often found out what was going on at Lookers by reading the news headlines in your publication. Quite often that was the only way we were finding out what was going on. And so, although it all resolved itself, yeah, it was an incredibly difficult period. But I think that can either make you or break you. And whilst it did feel at times as if it was going to break us, because it's a terribly distressing sort of period when you can't get the microphone back and say, look, we haven't actually done any of this stuff. There really isn't anything wrong, and it will all resolve itself. And of course, some people want to believe it, James.
Yeah.
And maybe you deserve. I reflect back and think maybe I deserve some of that. Maybe there's a certain degree of kind of arrogance or overconfidence, or I don't know. Maybe you get a bit carried away with your own hype sometimes when you live in a sort of bubble at the top of one of these companies. But I have to say, I've come out of it feeling much more grounded, much more humble, much more sort of connected to the things in life that really matter. Because in truth, for probably 20 years, I'd hardly seen my family. I'd largely disconnected from friends because work calls always took priority. And and actually, I probably didn't keep myself in good shape, probably drank too much. It's a social sort of industry. It's easy to fall into that trap. I suspect there'd be lots of people in senior positions who will recognize that. So, I was in 4 different hotels and 4 different nights a week. And to me, a hotel was a bar with rooms,
Yeah.
So part of the way I coped with the stress was probably go and have a beer or a glass of wine.
Yeah, I'm sure that's all too familiar with many people listening to this, Nigel. And I, I suppose this sort of that what you've said there answers a question I was going to say about have you ever wanted to go back and do it again? But it sounds like it was it was a bit of an end for you in the motor retail world. I mean, when that Lookers deal came about with the Canadians buying into it, was there part of you that thought, maybe I could get some backing and buy it myself? Do
No,
you
I
want to
mean,
go back?
definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I should just complete what happened really because I realised I needed to get sort of fit for purpose. In that year following the departure from Lookers, I stopped drinking altogether. I lost a lot of weight, and I started running and then cycling and getting a lot fitter. And as I say, reevaluated my priorities in life.
Mm.
And I realised actually I was a much happier person at that kind of healthy, grounded level. What it made me realise, to answer your question, James, is that I was under a much greater degree of pressure than I had ever even acknowledged to myself. So, albeit, I was really tempted to get back into it at many times over the last few years. Part of me realizes I don't want to go back into that kind of relentless 7 day a week, 14, 15 hour a day. I mean, it just never stops, does it? It's the nature of retail. And I largely loved it for the best part of that 30 years. But you need to, if you're going back into it, you need to know you're going back into the lion's den, and there's no way you can switch it off. The emails and the reports and the people, it's an intense thing. But I suppose the other thing is, in truth, you become yesterday's man really quickly. And I can see it in recruitment now, James, that if somebody's been out of the firing line for a year or two, it becomes much harder to get them back into this position that they were in. Companies will always favour somebody who's right in it now. So even if I had wanted to, I'm not so sure that I could have done.
The motor trade, though, is incredibly addictive, isn't it? I mean, I can see that just selling, terrible Toyota Arises like the one behind me. I can see like why people do it. There's a high of buying something, preparing it, selling it for a bit more money, turning the money. In some ways, it is a little bit like gambling, isn't it? Because
It is.
you're gambling on whether that car you're buying is going to sell. So I can see why it is so addictive. What would you say to people out there listening to your story who might relate to it, might be in similar situations? What would you say to them?
Firstly, I would say, be honest with yourself. If you are finding that you are on a treadmill and it's not making you happy, or you're really suffering with it, or you're just struggling with the particular role that you're in, I would say just do something about it, because, I know it's a cliche, but we're only here once. And there are other alternatives. I think sometimes when you're in something a long time, you think it's the only thing you can do. When in reality, the industry is a broad church, and there are lots of great companies who are suppliers to the industry, or they're finance or leasing companies, or they're remarketing businesses or digital businesses who value people who've been at that coalface and played that game. How many can I sell and what's the score on the profit sheets? It is like a sport, but they value that kind of hard experience at the coalface. And so there are lots of other things that can be done in the industry that might give you a better balance if that's part of the problem. So I think, but acknowledging it yourself first and not sort of bottling it and trying to sort of hide it away is the first step towards a kind of healthier, happier life. But I think most of us just sort of brush it under the carpet and say, "I'll be fine."
Yeah, just get on with it.
Yeah.
So the new business that you've got involved with, talk me through that. How did that come about, and what's it all about?
Well, when Andy and I went from Lookers, one of the franchise directors for the Ford division was a long-term colleague of mine, Colin Pybus, and he left within about a year of us going. And he he went into recruitment himself. And I think the intention was that he would just leverage his contact book and he would help place some of the good people that he knew into other companies. But it grew much quicker than he expected. And over the course of the last sort of 4 or 5 years, he's built a really nice business. And I think he recognized that there is a gap in our industry for automotive people with our automotive background doing automotive recruitment. There used to be one or two companies that were quite well known in the industry for doing that sort of thing, but for one reason or another they seem to have kind of disappeared into obscurity. And there are some perfectly good generic recruiters, but then they're not staffed or run or led by people with our sort of automotive background. And so he's built a nice business. And when I found myself this year thinking, maybe it's time just to sort of hang up my boots, I'm 57 this year. My dad retired at 57. I really don't want to go back into that relentless job. So what will I do? Colin rang me and he said, I'm selling this business. I want to go traveling. Your name has come up as somebody who might run it for the private equity company that backs the bigger agency that he was selling to. He said, would you be interested? And I said, no, not at all. He said, oh, right. He said, you wouldn't be interested. You've got a lot of contacts. You could add value. A lot of the customers too. I said, no, I'd be interested in doing the job. I think it sounds quite exciting, but I wouldn't be interested in working for a private equity company, essentially. So, but maybe you and I could do a deal. And so I went and met him, discussed how he'd structured the deal, and I matched the offer. And bingo, here I am.
Incredible. I mean, it's taking on, going from what you were doing before to taking on a whole new business. I mean, you're effectively starting again, aren't you? I mean, do you get the same buzz? Do you enjoy it as much?
Honestly, I can tell you, James, I get more of a buzz out of this than I have for years and years. I mean, I always really thoroughly enjoyed. I used to say to Mark Squires, stupidly, I enjoy this job so much I'd do it for free. And I did. I thoroughly enjoyed running these car dealerships. But it did get harder and harder. And this gives me all the social connection. It gives me all the influence over people's careers. I get to work with motor groups all over the country. And I have to say, many of the people owning or running these motor groups have been friends over the years for 30 years. So I love dealing with both the customers and the candidates. And it feels so kind of obvious and straightforward for me to do it. But I don't have to pay their wages. And I don't have to look at the spreadsheets every night. And I don't have to worry about whether the stock is going over age or whether we're making margin out of the recovery rate and things. It doesn't come with all the stress of that. But I get the good bit. And the people bit of the job, James, was always the bit that I enjoyed best. Building teams was always the bit that I enjoyed the best.
What about so where are the challenges in the recruitment market at the moment? And we've heard anecdotally that there's a lot of problems with finding good technicians, as an example. I mean, what are you seeing now you're on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, we recruit mostly for after sales. I mean, we do all the roles in the dealerships and a lot of the senior roles above general manager, more on a kind of anonymous, confidential basis. But the bread and butter is technicians. And you're absolutely right. The real pressure points seem to be around technicians, particularly level 3 qualified techs, and body shops. The pay rates for painters and panel beaters, particularly, I was quite taken aback when I've seen firsthand now what the sort of market rate is for these qualified, skilled guys. They're earning more than newly qualified accountants and lawyers and doctors. These are
What sort
proper
of numbers are we talking?
55 grand basic, 75 OTE.
Wow.
That's a very common sort of pay rate for a skilled painter or panel beater now.
And what about in the other areas of the businesses? Are there any challenges there? I mean, is it very competitive finding good people? I mean, are they in really high demand and can
Yes.
sort of name their price?
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, it appears that the CIPD, the sort of HR Institute, and many other organisations have done studies on this. But I can tell you anecdotally, this is how it feels: that about 30% of people in jobs are actively looking, and so they've registered their CV proactively with someone like us, or on CV Library, one of these sort of big resources, and they're applying for jobs and they're looking out for ads. But 70% of people are passive. They just go to their work. They've never thought about leaving, possibly a bit institutionalized. They're just happy tipping up to work, and it's not on their radar. The value that a company like us adds is that through a network of contacts, general managers, service managers, workshop controllers, through to the techs, is that we can chat up the 70% of people that aren't looking. And if you're only recruiting from the 30%, they tend to be the ones that don't stay very long, and they're off to the next job within a couple of years. And they're the kind of, revolving door. The real job, if you want a slow staff turn down and you want to build stable teams, you've got to recruit the sort of people that aren't looking.
Yeah.
And generally that's quite difficult to do. It takes a lot of time and effort and a decent network of contacts.
And more generally, you're talking to lots of dealers. You mentioned during our chat you're making lots of phone calls now. What are you hearing from dealers out there? I mean, you obviously, when you're chatting to them, what are they most concerned about?
Far and away, the biggest concern is the push towards electrification, without there necessarily being the kind of underlying retail demand to support it. And so, all the kind of obvious things that you report on regularly, but the pressure that then flows through the business, because, traditionally there are lots of release valves to help hit that target, aren't there? And we all know what they are. It might be pre-registration, the obvious one. It might be putting them on rental or leased fleets. But what I'm hearing is, those release valves feel very risky to dealer groups, because you're effectively then buying that asset one way or another. You're holding it for a while, and what's it really worth? And do you really want your rental or lease fleet, or your pre-registered stock, to be so heavily geared towards something where there isn't this underlying demand? And what I'm hearing is, if the target for the ZEV mandate is 28%, the underlying retail demand's probably half that. And so you've got to find ways of hitting that target. And I think the pressure it seems to be causing right the way through the business, flowing into used cars, is the biggest distraction.
If you were running a dealer right now, what would you be focusing your time and effort on?
Well, I already was in this space. You have to focus it on building overhead absorption through after sales. I think most companies think that it's all about hitting the new car target, when the reality is, if you can make the underlying profits from the used car department on top of a fully absorbed overhead. I mean, I know that's tough, by the way. I'm not underplaying how tricky that is. But if you can have very high absorption of your overheads from after sales, make your profits from used cars, well then, the new car thing can be challenging, but you've got a healthy underlying business model. But of course the costs are tricky. That's the other whole area that everybody's saying, is that that national insurance rise has caused a big ripple effect, because we're still a very labor intensive business, thankfully. There's still a lot of human beings needed in these businesses, and that's a lot of wages and it's a lot of national insurance. So the cost escalation is difficult. But yeah, I would be focusing on after sales and used cars.
If you were going to start up another dealer group now, what brands would you want to have in your portfolio? Give me 3 brands that you just think you would definitely have in your dealer group. I'm just fascinated here, considering you've had so many over the years.
Yeah. God, that's a really good question, James. It's not like you to ask a good one like that.
Oh, dear. Well, low blow that was.
We'll give him the rest of the day off.
So, I mean, there's not an incredible amount of science behind this. This is going to be more of a kind of, instinctive, emotional sort of reaction to that. But I think if you've got brands where there is a strong underlying emotional pull towards the product, I think you give yourself a much stronger chance of being able to make money out of it. And so I know it's gone through ups and downs, but for me, Range Rover, Land Rover would always be in that top 3 because, I remember a little anecdote for you. 20 odd years ago, one of the dealerships that I was running in my patch for Reg Vardy, we had Land Rover in Edinburgh, Perth, and Cooper. And so I was sat in the dealership in Perth. You can imagine big sort of shooting, fishing, hunting sort of community. And there was this farmer who sat in front of me, was really unhappy because it was on its second gearbox with his Range Rover. And I think he might have even just changed the engine or something. I mean, it had terrible problems. And he sat in front of me and said, this is my 6th Range Rover. I won't do the accent. He said, this is my 6th Range Rover. And he said, look at the problems I'm having with the thing. It's an absolute disgrace. And every time it's in here for weeks, and you take forever to fix it, and some of it's covered under warranty, but some of it isn't. And I thought, yeah, fair enough. We're going to lose this guy. And he said, so let me tell you, I just hope my next one's a lot better. And I thought, wow, and so a brand like that has such strong emotional pull. It's so, I mean, people have tried to copy the Range Rover, and there's some perfectly good products, X7, GLS, big lumps of cars, but nothing seems to quite match what a Range Rover does. So number 1 probably would be that, for similar reasons, but a much broader range. And I think they have nailed it with the electrification, is BMW. I think the ranges on those BMWs, the sophistication of the cars, they were always known for the precision engineering, but I think they've become beautiful again. They had a period where they perhaps didn't look so great. They looked a bit numb, but they're beautiful looking cars, brilliant engineering, and they're getting the electrification as good as anybody, I think.
Throw in a Chinese one.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, if you had to pick a Chinese brand as your 3rd, which one would you go for?
Well, only because they are an absolute powerhouse. And I do recognize that. I mean, somebody said to me recently, well, you do realize that the Chinese have already won.
Yeah.
We just don't realize it yet.
Yeah.
We haven't woken up to it yet, but they've already won. So I think I would pick the absolute Goliath powerhouse of BYD because, they are going to be successful, and they are going to make sure they are successful. And I think the cars are beautiful. You see them driving on the roads, and they look fab.
And I hear from every franchise holder who's got it how well it's doing for them. So I mean, it's clearly working from a business proposition as well. So
Yes, and interestingly, that was one of the themes that's come out of my sort of tour of speaking to heads of dealer groups, is that all of them seem to be sort of realizing that they need to get into the Chinese brands, and are very positive about, Armada JQ, seems to be selling very well as well.
yeah, definitely. Nigel, thank you so much for being so open and honest with us and having such a frank conversation. It's been very refreshing and good to see you. But for those people listening, if they want to get in touch, here, promo time, how can they do it?
Yeah, well, I think quite a lot of people probably can get access to my number anytime. But yeah, ring my mobile 07591 764446, or Nigel at pybusrecruitment.co.uk. Yeah, and listen, we'd love to hear from anybody. So thanks for the free ad.
No worries. No dodgy text message to Nigel, please. Yes. Right, great stuff. Thank you very much. But John, we should probably do some stories. We interrupt this broadcast for some breaking news. John, I don't want to panic you, but the Car Dealer Podcast Live is coming round really rather fast.
Yes, I know that, James, because I own a calendar. But clearly you've been not paying attention.
How dare you, John? If I hadn't been paying attention, how would I know that it's on the September the 24th in Abingdon that we've got the Polestar boss, Matt Galvin, Vicky Hart from Waylands, and Alex Bradley from Small Cars Direct on with us,
Well, technically it's closer to Didcot, but I'll let that one go. Anyway, I bet you've forgotten how people can book tickets.
No, John, because on my script right here, it says head to cardealermagazine.co.uk/podcast, and people listening to this can book tickets with the special discount code PICANTO for 10% off. There's a social barbecue after the recording and plenty of time for a social catch-up with other like-minded dealers. We look forward to seeing you there. This is a paid partnership in association with Dealerway. John, guess what?
Oh, God, you've bought more ducks, haven't you?
No ducks, John. Wrong there. I've actually got a new habit. I've signed up for Dealerway alongside more than 2,500 other rated and vetted car dealers to sell my trade part exchanges. The site is designed for dealers to sell their part exchanges for more money quickly and easily. There's no seller's fees, and buying a car costs just £99, one of the cheapest around. And when I haven't got the time to list a car myself, I can even WhatsApp them the details and they do it all for me.
That sounds awfully familiar. So are you selling all your stock there now?
Not exactly, John, but if I do have a sudden influx of Kia Picantos, I know where to send them. Dealers can find out more at dealerway.co.uk. We'll be right back. Now, John, I'm really enjoying how easy it is to pay sellers on CarWow.
I mean, presume you'd rather not pay them at all.
No, that is true, but now I can do it with CarWow Wallet. You can pay sellers, finance houses, and more instantly, literally in one click. It's secure, easy to use, and gets rid of all the pesky finance back and forth. It's a total game changer, John.
That does sound pretty good.
If you want to find out more, dealers can log on to carwow.co.uk/partners/carwow-wallet. Now, back to the podcast.
So James and I are going to run through our favourite stories of the week, and at the end, Nigel gets to decide which one of us chose the best ones and who's the winner. Unusually, James won last week, so he gets to go first.
Wow, 1-1, John, in this series, so I'm going to try hard. I am picking news from used car supermarket Big Motoring World, and the controversies there continue, John. This week, they were suspended from Trustpilot, the reviews site, for allegedly breaching the reviews. The platform has put a notification on their profile to say that they have breached their rules, and their trust score has been hidden as a result of that. We looked into this in detail. We spoke to Big Motoring World and asked for their side of the story. Lawrence Vaughan, who is the CEO there now, that FreshStream has taken over that business, and Peter Wardell is obviously in the wilderness at the moment.
He's not. He's in Kent, probably. But
or
To you,
Spain.
that is the wilderness, James.
Or Spain. But yes, so Lawrence Vaughan gave us a very long comment, summarised as a potential misunderstanding. He said, so the allegations on this are that the used car supermarket had basically been encouraging people to write them positive reviews. There were some allegations that this had been taking place. Lawrence told us that might be misconstrued in the fact that they asked their customers to fill out a satisfaction survey for themselves, and it might have looked like they were trying to encourage positive reviews on other sites like Trustpilot. But we know how important reviews are. It's obviously very, very important for this business, Clever Car Collection. It's really helps give customers trust. And there's those new rules that we talked about. Was it last week or the week before that have come into force? The could fine dealers heavily, 10% of global annual turnover or £300,000 if they break these rules about reviews. So a difficult situation for Big Motoring World. This, I mean, they are, not really afraid of controversy. I mean, they seem to court it. There's quite a lot of it around that business, but this one's not going to go down well. They say that these allegations are completely false, just to give their side of the story, and they are working with Trustpilot to try and have their reviews reinstated. But yeah, difficult situation there, John.
Yeah, I thought the bit of text that Trustpilot have put on their page is it's vague to the point of you sort of think, well, what are you on about? Because it says this company has been inviting people to review them in a way that encourages positive reviews. Well, lots of things could encourage positive reviews, including giving good customer service. So where does it end? I mean, like yesterday we went to Starbucks, did we not, James? And we were handed a receipt at the end that said, you'll get £2 off next time if you give us a review. Is
Not
that,
allowed, is it?
I know that is encouraging, it's encouraging a review, but is that encouraging a positive review? It's very fine line, I think, on all this. I mean, I don't quite know the in and outs of this. And there's a few more allegations in this story from people on Facebook. There's a Facebook group about Big Motoring World problems, as it's called, because, of course, it's an enormous car supermarket. And unfortunately, you will, with used cars, get issues, won't you? And as we know, customers are not always even-handed in their evaluation of how something was handled when a car goes wrong. So, yeah, I don't know. But this is the first thing I've seen like this on
Yeah.
Trustpilot, actually.
Big Motoring World has obviously been on the BBC, having had problems with customers. There are those two Facebook groups, one of which has got 6,700 members, which is called Big Motoring World Complaints, with lots of people moaning about how they've done business with that company. Well, they're selling a huge number of cars, aren't they? They had 7,700 used cars in stock when I checked their website earlier this week. It doesn't always go well. But what I will say is, I went to Lawrence Vaughan, CEO, and I said, "Look, these are the allegations. This is what's happened." I mean, we broke this story earlier this week, but he came back with a very long and detailed comment, and that doesn't always happen with these businesses. Sometimes you go to a company and they just say no comment or just send you something very short. He went into detail, and we've published a lot of that in our story, so people who are interested can go and read what he had to say. But he clearly cares about what's happening there. He clearly cares about trying to improve it, and pointed out a lot of that in his comments. So I think fair play to them, really, for putting their hands up. This has obviously happened. They have been banned from Trustpilot, but looks like they're trying to do all they can to put it right. Nigel, it's a difficult one, this, isn't it? But I think from what I understand, they're the first dealer to have been banned from Trustpilot. I mean, it doesn't look great, does it?
It doesn't, but I agree with everything you've said, that the reality is that these reviews play a very important part in customers' decision making, and their sort of trust in the dealerships. So I understand why all dealers, franchised or independent, will encourage people, if they've had a good experience, to write a good review. At the end of the day, you can't ask somebody to write a good review if they didn't have a good experience. And it just seems a kind of unnecessary, brutal reaction from Trustpilot, given that virtually everybody on there will be doing something similar.
I think they had to do something because of these new rules. Really, I mean, on a wider point, Nigel, to sort of slightly move it away from the story. I mean, used car supermarkets have had quite a tough time, haven't they? I mean, it's that sort of format which sort of grew in popularity has dropped down. Many of those listed businesses, or as they were, have closed them down. Do you think it's still a viable business option?
I mean, clearly not for the sort of, the franchised dealer network. I think there is a place for it, James, if you're going to push into the older vehicles, which is something that traditionally all of us as franchise retailers have struggled with. Because when you're having to put it in the franchise silo, of course, it has to come to a high preparation standard. It has to have a manufacturer warranty on it. The team in the dealership will feel under pressure to create the same sort of margin as a nearly new car. And so the conditions aren't set very well to retail older cars. I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And I've just been to Northern Ireland and seen my friends,
I saw that on
the
LinkedIn.
McNabs.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, they are brilliant retailers. Both Colin Senior, Colin Ross, Keith, and the lads over at Car Brothers. But they have built a brilliant business purely on the back of retailing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old cars. They brought in a 10-year-old S-Type Jag R. Look, I mean, still looks great. I think they bought it in for kind of 10 or 11 grand or something. It's a big lump of a car. And it made me realize, a bit like Charles Hurst did, if you gather those together in one area, and I think they called it kind of budget direct or first time buyer or something, and sweep them away from the dealership, then there's a place for it where you're going to retail those cars that in truth would have gone to auction. And so I think there is still a place for it, but on a general level, the way that Pete Waddell, who's a mate of mine, did it, I thought was great. That sticking 1,000 BMWs in one massive site and giving a reason for people to come. Well, if I'm in the market for a BMW in the south of England, well, I'm going to go there. I've probably come from all over the country. So I think done correctly, there is definitely still a format there that can work, but the generic sort of used car supermarkets that are competing head on for 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old cars, the franchise dealers are good at that now.
Yeah, it's interesting how that landscape has changed. But John, over to you. That's my first story.
Lovely stuff. Right, I'm going to talk about employee car ownership schemes, which is something that I think if you're not in the industry, if you don't work for a car dealership or you don't work for a car manufacturer particularly, you've probably not actually come across. But it's a way of, for those who are not aware, of which most of our listeners are, a way of getting your employees into a sort of discounted brand new car as part of an overall employee package of benefits, shall we say. So it's a great way of giving your employees something a little bit extra. But as announced in the budget, whenever the budget was, this is now sort of going to come to an end because they're not taxed at the minute as a company car because of it's a bit complicated, isn't it? But it's sort of the employee sort of owns the car, so it's not a company car in the traditional sense. You don't get hit with the same benefit in kind. Rachel Reeves wants to clamp down on that and close that loophole, as she says, which means that all of these cars from October next year will be hit with a traditional company car tax. And this is proving to be a bit of a problem. I mean, I had a phone call from a dealer, James, while you were off floating around in Spain, which I duly wrote lots of notes on and forgot to tell you about. But I assume this dealer might have spoken to you since then as well. Hence, you've written this story. But I've also, this dealer was very worried about it. But I've also spoken to, strangely, like a luxury car manufacturer. And they were worried about it from the point of view of not actually selling their cars to their employees like this because they're way out of their budget, but as a sort of benefits package. It's something that, from their point of view, they said, we employ lots of people in this car company. across a whole manner of different roles. A lot of them are not car people necessarily. And we have to say to them, well, let's say you want to employ an events team or an events manager or whatever. What's bringing them in versus working for a luxury brand like Rolex or working for a luxury hotel chain? They will all have benefits of some description. And this is the way that we get the best candidates to come to our company. And this is going to be a bit of a problem. And then when we talk about dealers, of course, I mean, there's a huge number of cars are registered in this way, because, as we know, there needs to be, as you were talking about, Nigel, there's valves that need to be opened in order to get stuff into the market. This is one of them. And this is one that's going to actually be hit quite dramatically from this tax change. I mean, the numbers that I was being told for this this dealer that spoke to me, one particular car company, shall we say, probably gets 5,000 used cars going into network stock every year from this. So if this is hit, that is quite a large chunk of cars. I mean, James, you wrote this story.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to your very comprehensive roundup, John, of that story, would be the fact that most of these cars are the sort of ones that, I mean, I would describe them as rather spicy. They're sort of they are the RS6, RS3, the RS models from Audi. They are the nicer cars that probably would never end up on an employee company car scheme, but it's a good way for dealers to register these cars for a short period of time and then put them on as demos, and let their customers have the experience of them. I think there are a large number of these cars as well in the network. I mean, I think Robert Forrester has written a piece about this. There was something that he wrote a letter to the Treasury, and I think that's what sparked me into writing this story. The Sunday Times covered it. He said something like 200,000 cars a year this accounts for. So it takes that all out of the network, takes it out of new cars, takes it out of used cars. So it is going to be a little bit of a problem. Nigel, you've probably got a lot of experience of these schemes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, every dealer has. I agree with Robert. I think the impact will be somewhere between sort of 5 and 10% of the new car market at a time where everybody's under pressure to sell enough new cars as it is. So, and of course, my memory of this is that if the car actually lost value, the loss in value was a taxable benefit, is a taxable benefit. So, we're only talking about the cars that held their value. And I can't see technically how that is a benefit. If technically the employee is buying the car and then it doesn't lose any value and the company's happy to enter into a transaction to buy it back again, I just don't see where the taxable benefit in that is. The biggest flaw, and so many of things that Rachel Reeves seems to do, seem entirely flawed to me, because of course, yes, you might take some tax revenue from these vehicles, but they won't exist. So there's 100,000 vehicles there that won't have VAT or road fund license or any of the other taxes that are associated with the vehicles. And where's the logic that says, well, I'm going to gain revenue from this, when in fact, isn't it obvious that those vehicles therefore won't exist and they'll be lost out of the market? That hits the whole economy of the motor industry, and you don't get the VAT receipts off it. So I think it's just flawed thinking.
Yeah.
Can I ask you from the point of view of recruitment as well? How do you get people in to the motor trade if there's not these benefits associated, when other industries have their own benefits in some way? How do you sell someone on the position of working in a dealership or an OEM without this kind of thing?
Well, I think it's a great question, John, and it is one of the key benefits over and above any other industry. I mean, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that it is a great industry to work in, and we do attract people from hospitality and retail and other sectors. So, I don't think it will fundamentally cause a problem, but what it may well do is yet further increase wage rates. It might mean that you've got to compensate in some other way for the loss of that benefit. So, it's another cost to businesses that they really don't need to bear. So if you dampening the new car market and potentially increasing costs, this is a government that's supposed to be all about growth.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a win-win, this, does
No.
it?
No. Difficult one. Right, shall I move us on?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, I'm going to pick a story about Admiral, the insurer, setting aside £50 million to compensate customers who received insufficient settlements.
Oh, this is a favourite one of yours, James, isn't it?
It is a favourite one of mine because this has really frustrated me over the last few years. I've helped many people who have had accidents get accurate valuations for their cars at the time. There was a flood in Gosport last year while I was off after having an operation. And that flood totaled a large number of cars and actually from with friends and family. So what they all did is they contacted me with their regs and their mileages of those vehicles. And I gave them accurate valuations looking at trade portals like CAP and Auto Trader, because obviously these people need to go back in a like-for-like vehicle. So they need to be able to go out and buy a retail car. So it's not a trade price they need, it's a retail price. That's what the insurer should do. Some of the prices these people were given from their insurers in the first instance were terrible. I mean, there was one guy, his value was £4,500 less than it should be, which is frankly ridiculous, really, isn't it? He went back I gave him the Auto Trader screenshot from the trade portal of what the retail price of that vehicle was. He went back to his insurer and immediately they put his valuation up £4,500. Now, he had the benefit of being able to speak to somebody in the trade to help him. There's many, many millions more people out there who trust their insurer and have trusted their insurers over the last few years to help them out at a time of need, help them out when their car has been totaled in an accident with an accurate valuation. And they have been given far less than they should be. So we all knew this was happening. This happened as a result of the fact that COVID had that bump and then used car prices rose. And the insurance companies didn't keep pace with that change in the industry. Admiral has now admitted that they didn't do that, that their systems were out of date, and they've put £50 million aside to compensate customers who were paid less. So the FCA has been looking into 12 insurers, apparently, who are responsible for some 70% of the motor insurance market. And a number of those have made these insufficient payments to customers when they've had those problems over the last few years. They're looking at a period of between 2019 and 2025. So this is very current. And I suspect a lot of people are going to be getting some decent checks in the post, because if you actually go back, I don't know how they're going to do it, but if you actually go back and look at the prices they've paid out and what that price should have been at the time, I don't know whether that can be done retrospectively by some of the trade price companies or Auto Trader, but they should have been given more. They should have been given more money. So it'll be interesting to see what that does for the economy, because that's a lot of extra money that people are going to have in their pockets. And we remember with the PPI scandal, that ended up in deposits for new cars, didn't it? But shocking that this has happened. And I think the fact that Admiral put aside 50 million means that there are many more millions to come for lots more people. Don't know, what did you think?
I remember when you were doing these things, and I think it was a bit of a surprise to us that this was the case. And I think I remember thinking at the time, well, I didn't realise you could. This is me. I didn't realise you could actually go back and negotiate with your insurance company and say, no. I mean, it's something I probably would have done, in fairness, if they'd offered me a stupid amount for my car if it had been written off. But thankfully, that's not actually happened, so I haven't had to do that.
But just going back,
you wouldn't assume that.
Going back to those people that I helped that time, I think it was 12, 15 people that I gave valuations to. Every single one of them was less than it should have been. And the average was about £1,000 less. Well, that's a lot of money, and we're talking cars that were £5,000-6,000 retail. And if they're offering £1,000 less on those, imagine what they've done on expensive BMWs or more prestige cars. I think there's a huge problem out there for this, and there's going to be a lot of money being paid out.
Yeah, and Matt Allwright agreed with you because he came and sat on your outdoor sofa and recorded some TV things.
He did, sure did. Nigel, did you see this story? I mean, what were your thoughts on it?
I haven't seen that story, James, so I was listening with great interest. But, listen, I think that's a great example of where the FCA is actually intervening in a meaningful way that protects consumers, and so they should, because that's willful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't use any other word in a world where we are so data rich. AI could probably give you a really good valuation at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
To have consistently undervalued payouts, you can only say it's willful. So
I completely agree with you, and I think people trust their insurers. They sort of trust their insurers to look after them at that point in time. And that's John's point that very few people knew that you could go back and negotiate. Every single person I was talking to at the time was like, "Really, I can do that. I can question what they've offered." Yeah, I said, "Absolutely, you need to." And as soon as they put forward some evidence that their valuation was wrong, they got the right payout, which says that these companies knew what they were doing. I think it's absolutely shocking.
the other point I'd add is that, of course, it's not like we've lived in a world where premiums have been coming down and they're
Yeah.
all under pressure. Premiums have been astronomical. So they've taken the premiums in good faith. The
Yeah.
people have paid the premiums in good faith, so they should expect to get a decent payout.
Yeah, definitely. John, you've probably got time to wedge one more in.
I am going to wedge one more in, and it's news from, well, it's not news, but it's from the IMDA. And we had an email this week from Umesh Samani, who's, of course, the chairman of the IMDA. It was a sort of open letter about some of the issues that he sees going on in the industry at the minute. And he's calling for just more joined up thinking between various bits of the motor trade. I mean, there's a couple of things he points out that there are issues. He's basically highlighting the issues that his members are finding at the minute. One of which is the slowness of finance companies to finally sign off when when you buy a car from somebody that's on finance, you pay off the finance, waiting for the letter to come through saying yes, it's definitely been paid off. Seems to take forever and is getting in the way of deals a lot of the time. That's one part of it, but the other is around service history, which is something that has been irking me for quite a long time, of how ridiculous the situation is around service history at the minute. If you think about it, we have lots of, well, you buy lots of cars, James, you'll know this, constantly. How can we have a situation where service history is so fragmented? Half of the things you buy are, you're looking for bits of paper that people lose, for example, or could be fraudulently changed quite easily. And then half of it is locked away behind sort of manufacturer digital records. And it's these digital records, I think, that Umesh particularly points out, because he alleges that they're not being updated a lot of the time. He points out to somebody, he bought a Jaguar from somebody, one owner car, had all the paper service history with it, was supposed to also be updated on Jaguar's digital records, and whichever dealer or dealers had been servicing it had not bothered to do that at all. So digitally, absolutely no record of this car being serviced. And then on the flip side, as happens occasionally, you buy a car from an auction from a company that's supposed to have digital records, and you will phone up the dealer, like a local dealer for a particular car company, and they will refuse to hand them over, any evidence of this car's service history, either because they don't want to or they'll blame GDPR,
Yeah.
which is a classic kind of get out, isn't it? So Umesh quite rightly points out, well, this is just, we're shooting each other in the foot here. You're stopping fellow motor traders from doing business. And to what end? It's madness. I think there needs to be like a joined up system for all this sort of stuff, doesn't there?
Yeah, I think that the point you've made there about the GDPR is just the bit that irks me the most on this, because I've had those conversations with main dealers, and you're like, you're not giving up any information that contravenes GDPR. This is a car, not a person, and all I'm asking is, has it been serviced? Yes or no? I mean, it's quite simple information and should be handed over. Really, they've been paid for it. And I have had some success. Mazda. I had a Mazda dealer who was very, very helpful and sent me over all the records printed out on a PDF very, very easily. Other dealers have been less than helpful, and I completely agree with Umesh on this front. I mean, it is something that we should have a little bit more of an open discussion about, because, like you say, nobody wins.
Yeah, and I would like to think it's sometimes the GDPR thing is not used as an excuse. It's just out of sheer panic or an abundance of caution. Of you've been stung before, James, with
Yeah.
service records with people's names on it, all that sort of stuff. We've had lots of conversations with these before, and I think perhaps there's been internal conversations in dealers, whether franchise or independent, do not hand over any service records unless they've been, gone through with a red pen and crossed out all the bits of personal information. And the fear of handing stuff over that you've missed something and then there's a fine coming from the ICO or whatever is terrifying. So I do sort of get that. But yeah, my point is, if there's MOT history is available online, why can't service history be the same? It's the same sort of information, isn't it? It's not tailored to a customer. It's tailored to the car, as you say.
Yeah.
Nigel, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't do anything but agree. And we're going to get there, aren't we, eventually? We live in a digital world. We're just still, amazingly, in 2025, still having these conversations. And we haven't moved to a fully digital world, but we will. We're just still in transition.
Yeah.
Hope so. Are you out of stories, James? Or
Yeah, I'm out. I think we're out of time as well. So.
Okay, so Nigel, before I ask your verdict, are there any stories you think we should have covered this week that we haven't?
Oh, crikey. I wish you'd given me a heads up on that.
You can say no, we've covered everything beautifully.
You've covered everything beautifully.
Well done.
Thank you. You can come back. So I'm going to have to ask you, what was your favourite story or stories?
There is one very clear winner for me, and it's only because, I think he is one of the great characters of the industry, and this industry would not be the same unless we had people like this around. And so part of the reason we all love it is because of the strong characters that work in our industry, and Pete Waddell is definitely one of those. And so any story that brings Pete back to the forefront gets my vote, and I wish him well. And it's lovely just to have him still part of the conversation.
Oh, well, that actually means that I am 2-1 up in the series, John. Thank you very much, Nigel. I will accept your win with gratitude. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, I'm going to go and deadlock the front door now. So you can
Well, I've got a Toyota Yaris to polish, John. So yeah, I'm going to be.
You have not. Luke's already polished that. I saw him doing it yesterday. Honestly,
lies.
Well, all that's left for me to say is thank you to Nigel for joining us today and sharing a bit about your story as well. It's been really good to have you on.
Well, it's a pleasure. No, it's been. Thank you for having me on and for the free advert.
No worries whatsoever, and best of luck with the new venture, Nigel. And thank you very much for coming on.
And listen, if those used cars don't work out, James, listen, I'll find you something.
Oh, thanks.
He's already got a job. Don't give him a third one. Oh my god. Thank you as well to James for not breaking off halfway between this to sell a Picanto to somebody, which I'm sure he was tempted to do. And thank you for listening. We will be back next week with another episode, so make sure you're subscribed so you can be notified when that goes live. We've not mentioned Car Dealer Podcast Live again, have we, James?
Oh, God. No, we haven't. Car Dealer Podcast Live, September the 24th. Get tickets on our website. Come along, hear from some fantastic guests, see some people in the industry you haven't seen for a while, enjoy a barbecue, and unfortunately you'll have to listen to John and I do this live. But apart from that, the rest of it will be brilliant. So please come along.
Well sold-ish. Well, if you want to check that out, there's links in the show notes below, as well as the stories we talked about today. And of course, head to cardealermagazine.co.uk for more news like this. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.